Hello, beautiful people. I am so excited to make this one. I make all my videos based on the energy that it feels, is it stewing in my head, packets that have been put here during trips, and doing entheogens, and they open when they open and they happen when they happen. So this one's been brewing for a long time. I'm very excited about it. I'm going to tell you, I have an Etsy store where I have products that have Amanita in them. One are my smoke blends. This last time, everything sold out in 3 days. And I do it about once a month. So the middle of March, I'll be restocking. I have ointment based on an old Russian recipe, and those have pretty much sold out. They sold out in 2 days. So I'll be restocking the store. However, also in the middle of March, I have panther caps. So this is Pantherina. This is all I made, and it's extremely intense. And I am only selling it in bottles this size because it'll be highly concentrated and you'll have to definitely dilute it before you use it. But one of the sponsors of this channel is one of our own. He's part of our community. He's a beautiful soul, and he owns Minnesota Nice Botanicals, and they quality test every single batch, and you can scan the QR code and find out exactly what's in your batch, so there's no crap. And I've got a whole video on CBD and scams and testing, so go find that. And I believe I have covered everything that I wanted to cover. My channel is under threat. If you want to keep up with me, please go to Odyssey. I've uploaded my entire catalog over there in case I wake up one day and this channel's gone. I don't care. This is going to be controversial, but if you hear me out, I think maybe I'll explain to you why my views are so unorthodox. We are just in the beginning stages of understanding entheogens and the role that they play in our lives. There's a lot to say about that and evolution and them as aliens and how they predate us here. And those are videos for another day that I will make. And psychology thinks that the ego is a human thing. And I am asserting that while it is part of being human, it is the awareness of our sentience, which means that even when we are out of our meat sack, our consciousness is ego. That the ego is our space that we own, that is our sense of self, in or out of our bodies. So that our awareness when we're on entheogens or when we have a near-death experience and we say I, that I is universal ego. The ego is the thing that helps us identify our travels and our journeys. Now, what those things mean and what we tell ourselves about our ego, that then depends on our state, out of a body or in a body, what we're going through when we're out of the body, whether it was a bad experience or a good experience, and the judgments and things that we give it. And then when we're in the body, our presence and our sense of self on the planet. And this is where Amanita is so important. And so let me explain. When we are born, we are 100% ego. We are consumed with the newness of being in a body. We're still bathing in the DMT of our birth and the where that we came from and the newness of our brain. And we are being supported very much by our consciousness and our awareness of where we just came from. And then as we're here longer and longer and longer, we slowly start to lose the memory of where we were and what it's like to trip and to not be in a body. And we're slowly getting excited about learning to embrace being here and to learn this body and to walk and to grasp, and everything is amazing. And oh my God, I'm here. Holy crap, I'm here. And so the excitement of being here is, we talk about it all the time, that light in your eyes when you're a child. And then if it's not damaged or destroyed, well, even sometimes when it is, The whole experience and definition of being a teenager is that ego-based sense of owning your space on the planet in a different way. Children automatically know to demand what they need to survive, right? It's all about survival, feeding the brain, learning the language, learning the culture, learning the customs, learning relationships, learning communication, learning how to fit in, learning how to make friends, right? Survival on the planet. But something beautiful and unique happens in adolescence and the later teenage years where you are driven to own your place on the planet, to become a thriving part of the planet, to play on the planet, to get in a van and live in a van and just go experience, to travel, to find a way to earn, to barter, to trade, to gain a skill, to hone your wisdom, to find what you came here to do, to experience. Like, that is the definition of adolescence. That is the beautiful ego. And I don't understand where this concept of the ego being bad came from, other than it's a holdover from religion and Christian doctrine that says that you are worthless and unworthy to get into the kingdom of heaven, that whole religion thing. And that this sense of self, the self is gross, the self is dirty, the self is ugly. Being human is gross. Being human is ugly. Being human is dirty. You got to transcend your body. The same thing Christians say. To be here is to be sinful, and you don't deserve to get into the kingdom of heaven except for the grace by God, the grace of God. And likewise, you're a dirty human until you do an entheogen, and then you get to go to a beautiful place where you get cleansed through ego death. You kill your sense of self, because your self is dirty. Like, oh my God, all of that is gross. It's so disgusting. And it's sad. And it is a product of humans trying to kill your sense of self. Let me explain. So, we know then this sense of ego, this sense of self, this sense of thriving and being human is beautiful. But if you are born neurodivergent, ADHD, or autistic, you know how you get shamed for just being who you are. If you're a normal child and you're male and you're born into a sexist society that tells you to stop feeling, that doesn't love you and comfort you when you're hurting, they tell you to toughen up, they tell you to suck it up, they walk away. If you were a baby left to cry it out, if you're spanked, if you're beaten, if you're abused, if you're shamed, so many of us have lived through that. And then if we're put into a school system where we don't thrive, and only actually very few thrive in a school system, in most school systems, you're forced as a child to sit in a desk for 8 hours a day. Like, that's the antithesis of what children are supposed to be doing. So if you were hazed, if you were bullied in school, all of these messages tell you that you are unworthy, that you are somehow not fitting into society, that you are failing, that you are broken. If you are sexually assaulted as a child, that's another whole level of shame where you have to disassociate so strongly and so deeply from the self that you split and you never grow your sense of self. You spend your whole life avoiding yourself. So that if you are enduring this long-term abuse, if you are gaslighted, I will tell you when you're full, no, you didn't think that. No, you don't feel that. Shut up. That's not what's wrong with you. If you are totally told to deny yourself, your feelings, your needs, your thoughts, your actions, if you're told, stop that, you're just trying to get attention. But yeah, I'm trying to get attention to get my needs met. So trying to get your needs met is wrong. Like, these are messages that come to you from so many sides that by the time you're 6, a lot of your sense of self, that childish light in your eyes, starts to dim. And you can look at your childhood pictures and see it go, and it's devastating to see. If you manage to make it through that, but the worst of your abuse starts to happen after that, and you can see then that transition from 6 to the preteen years, then you go into your teen years feeling like you don't deserve to own your space or have your ego. And so then when those teenage years kick in and the hormones kick in, that's going to turn into rebellion, because your body is driven to do these things, to embrace the world. But you're fighting with your sense of self. So then it becomes a war. You become an angry teenager. You become someone who goes to the occult and the alternate. The Amanita is going to save this planet. And the Amanita is the ego mushroom, and the Amanita is the answer. Eventually, when you are denying your needs, when your needs are denied for you, there are many, many reasons for panic and anxiety. Many. And I've got a whole series that I'm going to be making on panic and anxiety and what it is, how you got it, and how to undo it. If you're living in a constant state of anxiety, that is a warning that your ego is being threatened, and your physical body is being threatened, and your emotional body is being threatened, and your needs are not getting met, and you are not okay. And those are alarm bells. Depression happens then when very early on the emotional body's needs are not getting met, and eventually it starts to give up and feel hopeless. And you can get to depression in many different ways, but depression can be a state of grieving. Now, it can be good. You're grieving a real loss of something. Depression is not always sick. Sometimes it's warranted. You need to be depressed. But sometimes depression is exhaustion, mental and emotional exhaustion from difficulties. It can be exhaustion from having a constant state of anxiety and you're starting to deplete your abilities. It can be overwhelm and fatigue to the point of giving up. There are layers and levels of depression. And the ego, which is behind the scenes of all of this, that is your presence, it's your beingness, starts to go, okay, I may have made a mistake. I thought I wanted to do these things. I thought I wanted to embrace the world. I thought I was happy. I thought I was good. I thought this was right. I thought I was okay. And eventually the self starts to say, Jesus, what's wrong with me? What happened to me? That was really arrogant of me to be so happy, to think that I could embrace this, to think that I could be this, to think that I could do that. God, why can't I fix this? Why can't I fix me? Why can't I measure up? Why can't I do right? Why can't I do good? What is wrong with me? And then you struggle for a drug, or you struggle to shut the voices up, or you struggle for a medication that you think is going to fix you, or you struggle for a different set of skills, or a new path, or a new guru, or a new meditation. You struggle to fix it because the ego is behind the scenes saying, go, do this, you've got this. You're supposed to be here, you're okay. But the humanness in you is going, but I'm not okay. But I've got to get okay. I got to stay here. I got things to do. I've got to fit in. I've got to survive. I've got to live. And so you just keep trying and trying and trying. And eventually, when the anxiety doesn't stop, it gets exhausting and can turn into depression. So you're living with depression and anxiety. And eventually you isolate because you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. You start sabotaging everything so it can't hurt you. Sabotage a job so you can't feel the rejection of getting fired. And you sabotage relationships and you sabotage friendships. And you even sabotage your own sadness. And all of this expresses itself in different ways. So like eating disorders. Most people with eating disorders have had sexual abuse. Those two things tend to go together. That's not my opinion. Studies show that. And that's such an egregious form of violation of the sense of self at such an early age that psychology says eating disorders are a form of control. I say, yes, a form of control driven by the ego that is fighting to find some sense of self. It is the largest loss of a sense of self when you suffer from sexual abuse and that disassociation. That is a massive denial of self from the get-go, from a very early age, when your ego's sense of self in this particular body is being created. That is a fast track to a loss of a sense of self. All of these other ways tend to be a more long-term chronic chipping away at the sense of self, until eventually, depending on how severe the abuse was, you wind up at suicidal. And suicidal is ego death. Being suicidal, you have killed the ego. You have killed that piece of you, the largest of you, that part of you that owns your sense of self and your place. Now, we know that when you look in a mirror, you perceive your body to look a certain way. And if you don't perceive it the way that it is, then that is a dysmorphia. So we know that you have perceptions of things, of yourself. And then you have this image of yourself as an entity, as a personality, as a kind person, as an asshole, as a giving person, whatever. You've constructed, right, that sense of who you think you are. But along with all of this, underneath all of it, the foundation is a sense of self and your ownership of your space here. And when you're an infant, it's tiny. It's only your body. But as you get older, your sense of self is your body, but also your family and maybe a couple of friends. And then as you grow and you become a teenager, you expand your sense of self. And so your sense of self starts to be, I am a surfer. I am a rock climber. I am a coder. And you start to take on different parts of you and you play with them. And as you grow and you get older, you expand your sense of self to be larger and larger so that you feel very concrete and solid in your ownership of your right to be here. You have strong boundaries. You don't let people treat you like shit. And you know who you are and you push back against oppression. And you love others and you seek to network and you're very passionate about what you do, or if that perception of sense of self has been damaged, then you let people walk all over you. You entertain narcissists and you become their supply. You don't say no. You suck up to people, you give gifts all the time, you manipulate and you cry and you overeat and you addict to things and you avoid emotion and you avoid conversation and you avoid people. These are all ways of avoiding your sense of self because it is getting smaller instead of larger as you're growing. You don't feel like you deserve to be here anymore. And that can turn into anorexia later, like in your teenage years. And, these aren't absolute. You can get to all of these things in different ways, some quickly, some slowly. But eventually, when you deny yourself enough, when you don't have a strong sense of self, you're depressed, listless, you give up, you have a fuck it attitude about the world. And eventually, your ego's place here through this body withdraws to the point where you no longer have that drive to live or be here. And that is being suicidal. Now, sometimes you're suicidal because you're in an immediate situation that is so painful and horrible and doesn't feel like it's going away that you just want the pain to end. And that's a different kind of suicide. But most people have a sense of being able to stick out really difficult situations. I assert that you came into that difficult situation already withering, already exhausted, anxiety-ridden, a smaller ego and a small sense of self, fed up, exhausted, and depressed. And you just couldn't take anything else more difficult. And then you get hit by a natural disaster and a job loss and a loss of a relative or a family member. Like, it starts to stack up to the point where it's an intense and extreme pain that you just don't feel like you're capable of tolerating anymore. I assert that when you do an entheogen, that what you're doing is, no matter how large or small the ego is while you're in the body, that as soon as you pop out of the body, that isn't ego death. That is the re-embracing of your sense of self outside of your body. That's actually the embracing of the ego. The grasping of, oh God, yeah, I forgot about my sense of self. It's a huge place to play, and I forgot that I'm worthy and that I'm loved and that everything is great and beautiful, and it sucked being in that meat sack, but I'm out of it, and I forgot that my ego is big and beautiful and that this is great. And there are so many of us, and it's just a good experience to be here. And then when you get back in your body, you're just in a condensed, more compressed form of the ego. Depending on your abuse and where you are. And it can be excruciatingly painful to come back to an ego that is supposed to be large, and instead it is small. And that's why I believe Amanita is the ego mushroom. The first time I did it, and it's not just me, the first time I did Amanita, my chip report is on my channel. You can go to the playlist tab. The first thing that I felt was this amazing sense of self. I was suicidal, by the way. I had already planned it. It's all in my story. I was going to do it, but I woke up the next morning with a sense of self that reminded me of my childhood. And I never looked back. And I have been doing nothing but growing my sense of self and owning who I am for the last 2 years. And the reason I finally made this video now is because the number one thing that I'm hearing from people that are using Amanita is that, oh my God, it stopped my anxiety and my panic, but I feel like I did when I was a child. I feel so motivated. I feel driven now to accomplish the goals I had forgotten 10 years ago. Everyone puts it differently, but they're saying the same thing. And that is, I feel myself again. Actually, a couple of people have said that exactly like that. I feel like I deserve to be here again. I feel big again. I feel like I'm large. And this is why I believe the Alice in Wonderland thing of being large and small, because your ego can get so small that you lose your sense of joy. And your ego can get so big that you can take it in a sick direction. That's another whole thing about the ego. And it's another whole reason why this mushroom is so highly censored, and why my channel gets censored, and why this mushroom's information has been censored as far back as humans have been on the planet. That's another video for another day. And it's why when you do Amanita on higher doses, you get a sense of being large and small, because it's playing with your sense of self, and it is in the process of adjusting you. You are going through, sorry, I have asthma. You're going through the process of adjustment. You're being measured and outfitted and worked on. And so you're experiencing inflation, deflation. You're getting large, you're getting small. Your ego's growing and shrinking, and everything is moving and getting adjusted and tweaked. And it's fun to see and to experience. And then when it's over, you wake up and you're like, oh my God. There are several ways though. There's, the heroic way, which some people don't get anything from. But I have yet to meet a single person, and now I've met thousands, who haven't gotten good results from microdosing it. Some immediately, Some will write me after a couple of weeks and just say, well, I guess this mushroom isn't for me. And then I hear from them 3 months later, oh my God, I'm so different. I want to give you an update. So Amanita is the ego mushroom. It is your sense of self. It's the entheogen that is here to help the human on that level, your relationship to the self. And I have other videos about its place in your psychology in the first 6 years of life. But where the psilocybin mushrooms work on your connectedness to others, and where the DMT-related entheogens, ayahuasca and DMT, work on the intergalactic universal, the Amanita works on your perceptions of yourself, your sense of boundaries, your rights, your ego, embracing your ego, loving yourself, and your sense of ownership. And this is why I believe the Christian church did their best to stamp out this mushroom and mushroom worship. Because modern, 2,000 years ago to today, Christianity knew that the only way to control people was to oppress them and make them lose their sense of self and tell them they're not worthy. And the only way to be worthy is to follow our rules and do what we say. And then you won't get your rewards here on earth, but when you die. However, before Christianity, they worshiped this mushroom and the psilocybins because they knew it was the medicine to control your sense of self, to help ease your pain of stress, panic, anxiety, but also of oppression and pain and difficulty, and owning your sense of presence, your motivation to get things done, your drive, your ambition. And then the psilocybins for community and love and cooperation and healing the fear and the trauma of the brain. These are our survival. That's another whole video. And I believe that's why the oppression exists and the suppression of these mushrooms, specifically this one. Because how do you control people who strongly own who they are and are not controllable and oppressible? I know I don't need to say that very much today. And I'm going to leave that at that. But this is what I believe the Amanita does for us. It's why I am forever in gratitude and in service to her. If you feel like I have taught you something, would you buy me a coffee? The link is in the description. I could use the support. I love you, beautiful people.